Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Real Cyber Talk podcast. Today we're joined by Saskia Coplans and Dan from OWASP. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself briefly to the audience and then we'll let these guys carry on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tom, one of the co-founders of Cytix. My background's in penetration testing and all things security.
Cheers. I'm Dan. I work primarily for Booking.com, but for this intents and purposes, I'm part of the OWASP admins for the Manchester chapter, organizing the meetups, organizing the community around security.
I'm Saskia. I'm founder and managing director of Digital Interruption and RecScan, and I've been on the board of OWASP Manchester for years. I don't know how many years. I also sit on the OWASP Education Committee, and I organise Manchester Grey Hats, which Dan's also involved with, and I run the local 2600 for Manchester as well. And we have a women's group called InfoSec Hoppers, which is a bit dormant at the moment. But yes, I do quite a lot of cybersecurity stuff.
Amazing. So I guess either Dan or Saskia, just for everyone else's benefit, OWASP obviously is quite synonymous with the OWASP top 10, but there's so much they do both globally as well as regionally. We've been involved with OWASP quite a bit since we joined, because I think when we set up Cytix, it was kind of around the time that OWASP was doing its post-COVID comeback, OWASP Manchester, that is. So yeah, I don't know, I guess maybe open the floor to you two to give a little bit of a background on what OWASP is globally and what it really means regionally.
Well, I guess OWASP globally, they're a nonprofit working for a safer internet. They're saying what people need to hear, how to protect yourself online, how to protect your products online. And they produce so many different articles and education pieces. I mean, I'll let Saskia go into detail since she's on the education board, but there's so many other open source projects as well that people can have for free. But also, if you've got an improvement, you can contribute, you can actively contribute to the community, to these projects.
Yeah, so the Global Foundation actually set up in America in, I believe it was 2001, so I think it's about 23 years old now. And it became a proper registered charity in 2004. And the idea behind it was to help developers understand how to develop more secure code. So the idea was to have, like Dan says, a safer internet. But it started off as web applications because the bulk of stuff was web app based at that point. Then mobile was brought in and then network was brought in. So there was a number of open source projects. So the idea is it's an open source foundation. Everyone can join in to anything that they want to be involved in. We had Zap for a while, which is now no longer part of the foundation, but that was the tooling that you could use to kind of break stuff and secure stuff. We do a lot of documentation, we do standards. The OWASP top 10 really kind of falls under the standards, but the standards are kind of, there's a lot more in terms of the standards for security that comes from OWASP itself. And then there's the chapters as well. So there's over 250 chapters across the world. So it's a very much a global institution. Yeah, and basically, the idea is to encourage greater security through education, through training. Obviously, we've got the conferences as well, so you can go to the OWASP conferences where there's like talks and training. So it's very much core, I think, of how cybersecurity is properly embedded within development.
What are some of the goals for OWASP Manchester, the regional OWASP that you guys are involved in? What are some of the kind of changes you'd like to see in the region? What are some of the ambitions of the chapter?
Well, I guess we want to reunite the community. The community everywhere has been scattered by COVID. So it's getting people back together, getting people talking in person again. You could sit on a Zoom call all day, and most of us actually do, but getting together in person, talking about the needs of the community and how we can share our knowledge with everybody else. Because sure, it's great, having the knowledge contained in one company over here, then that company does better. But if we can share, then we can make everybody stronger.
And I guess so often in the InfoSec community, it's all well and good if you're working in an organization that has 6-7 security engineers, but more often than not, particularly if you're looking at Northwest companies, you've often got a single security person, or maybe you've got a development team with a single security champion. And I guess they're the people that are coming on their own to OWASP, and they're connecting with a bunch of other like-minded people in similar situations, and that's how they're getting that interaction that you would otherwise get at a big corporate.
Exactly. They're there on the evening at the event, talking, sharing notes, sharing the horror stories, but also sharing some successes from those horror stories as well. Hey, we tried this and it worked really well, or ooh, avoid that. That doesn't work at all. And it's fun to see people sharing those stories over a beer, over a soda, over pizza.
Yeah.
And is it mostly sort of developers, builders who are coming to these events? Obviously, my background in penetration testing, OWASP's always been a big part of that. Do you get a lot of people on the offensive, defensive, and building side, or is it?
It's a massive mix. It's huge.
Yeah.
The spread is enormous. Yeah, we actually have quite a lot of software testers. We have a lot of students. We have a lot of devs. Obviously, we have the security people as well. I think one of the main sort of reasons for the meetups is because it helps direct people to wider resources. So you come and you see a talk that's interesting, but as we all know, security is absolutely massive. I mean, you're thinking about things in terms of penetration testing, so you're thinking about the offensive side, but when we look at security as a whole, it's like looking at the medical profession, but only being a physiotherapist or only being a neurosurgeon. You know, it's absolutely sort of massive horizon of different skill sets. And OWASP started off very much with the sort of web application security thing, and it's had to grow with the industry as well, which is why like network and mobile were included. And we've seen definitely over the years that the number of people who are now attending the meetings is reflecting that. Wouldn't you say, Dan?
Exactly. Yeah. My background's testing and test management. So I've been driving security through that community at Booking, and we've got a whole number of testers very interested in security. So I keep trying to bring all of them along. So it's a huge mix across the board. And especially the student scene. Manchester is a great university for computing. And actually we had a speaker at the last event who was a student at Lancaster University come all the way down to give a speech on all of his research.
Amazing. And I guess I'd love to come back onto the student thing, but a sort of anecdote that I had was one thing that I've noticed a lot, particularly in the last few years, is that people that come from like a risk background, like not even necessarily cyber risk, but risk, and they step in and they're used to handling all these maybe financial risks and other ones, and then they look at security and they go, "What do you mean? Our software has a bunch of vulnerabilities that we're just working through the backlog." And it's like, you know, I guess for a lot of people that are used to operating with very little to no appetite for risk, they soon learn that with security, quite often it's a case of drawing that line in a more sensible place than maybe having that sort of zero tolerance approach.
Oh yeah. I'm dealing with the risk people at the moment on a few risk exceptions. I won't go into the full rant, but yeah, getting them to understand software risk and you know, data risk and data exposure risk and all that sort of stuff there's certainly a language barrier.
They should be coming to more OWASP events.
They should be coming to more OWASP events. Exactly.
Brilliant.
It doesn't help that all our language makes us sound like an Amsterdam sex show. Kind of puts people off a little bit, but yeah. And I think that's the thing there, isn't it? Every industry has its own language. We all use our own acronyms. We all have our sort of nomenclature that makes sense to us. And it doesn't make sense to people who are outside of the industry. So things like OWASP try and break that down into normal language and make things more accessible. And I think that's a really, really important part of it. I think that's where the standards are really helpful. If you look at cybersecurity standards across the board, they're really, really difficult to deal with. Like the ISOs, they're just absolutely enormous. And they're very, very hard for non-technical people to be able to decipher and work through. It's a skill set on its own. So I think the fact that you have this very, very simple breakdown that sort of starts with the top 10 and then it kind of goes into more detail in stages is a really accessible thing that OWASP has created.
But I think I think to the point of OWASP, I think that's exactly why things like the top 10 are so good. Like, as frustrating as it can be, having been on the testing side for so long, that sometimes people just are like, you know, I appreciate all these vulnerabilities, but can you show me how many of them apply to the OWASP top 10? And it's like, you know, there is context to be applied here, particularly within the security practitioner role, but it's also on the flip side to that brilliant when you've got CFOs, CEOs being like, look, you know, are we vulnerable to the OWASP top 10? I mean, obviously it's a really high level understanding, but it is an understanding. And I guess that's why things like this are great for business, not just for the security professionals.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You know, we do presentations on the various top 10, on the various insights that OWASP have, and we do try to break it down and make it relatable for every role that's coming. I mean, I remember when I started in security, I'd come to these events and just scribble down words to Google afterwards. And go, okay, we need to do better explanations during the meetup. So that's one of the things that I like to push, that we're using language across the board.
Yeah.
Regular language across the board instead of security language.
Definitely. Cool. So I guess while we're on the topic of top 10s, I think let's maybe cover some of the things that OWASP are doing in terms of either coming out or have just done. I'd love to talk about some of the more regional events, but let's come back to that. So can you just talk us through a little bit about what's on the horizon for OWASP and what's just come out that people should be aware of?
What's just come out? There's a mobile top 10 just came out earlier this year. I only found out yesterday when one of my testers who was looking into writing articles for internal booking use was like, "Did you know there's a new one?" I was like, "No, but thank you." The API one was renewed last year.
Sure.
And the web one was renewed in 2021. So we've got a fresh list of all three of the main OWASP top 10s.
Well, web's due for a renew. If it was 21, it'll be due for a renew because every top 10 gets renewed after 4 years. So, so if it was 21, what we're 24 now. So the survey should be going out soon. So people get invited to actually contribute towards the top 10. And it's sort of like this wider survey where like people who specialize in a certain area can say what they've seen becoming the trends more over that last 4 year period. So, like if you're kind of well known to be a specialist in mobile, OWASP will often get in touch with you and ask if you can contribute towards the top 10. So it is very, very much community led. And it's why they tend not to change enormously. They just tend to kind of swap around a bit. But we did do a piece of work over the last couple of years where we did kind of a refresh on how they're presented, because we found that there were quite a few of the attacks felt like they were being duplicated. So we started to group things. So instead of talking about SQL injection per se, we started talking about injection attacks, and try to make it like a little bit more grouped and a little bit more user friendly, because it was becoming, I think, a little bit difficult to explain those very subtle differences to people at C-suite level and people who aren't technical. But yeah, it's great that network and API and all of these other areas have been added in, because in the olden days it was just web.
I can't believe you just told me that 2021 was nearly 4 years ago. I'm just struck by that.
Because you're old, mate. Every other day is your birthday now.
When you said 2021, I was like, that's quite recent. And I was like, nearly 4 years ago. Cool. One thing that I wanted to cover that I think is really interesting. So OWASP is obviously quite often closely aligned with the open source community, and we're seeing a lot now in terms of open source tooling in comparison to commercial tooling. One thing that we've been quite passionate about as a business is trying to go open source first when it comes to looking at different tools, and how we can better that community. I don't know if you wanted to say anything around like OWASP's relationship with kind of open source tooling and how that kind of, you know, I know there was that previously, and kind of how that works.
Pretty much every project that OWASP do is open source. Saskia, and they are all about the community and all about bringing people together to work on projects to improve the tooling for everybody else. So they are open source first.
Yeah, there's all sorts of little bits and bobs as well that are quite useful. So I mean, Zap is an amazing tool. It's obviously everyone kind of knows of Burp, and because Burp is a commercial tool, although there is Burp community, it's probably a bit more user friendly in some ways than Zap. But Zap has some really amazing features that a lot of people don't really know how to utilize. And if you kind of look at the training materials behind it, it's a fantastic tool. In fact, one of my testers will only use Zap. He won't use anything else. It's got an amazing reporting function, which saves you a load of time. There's about 36 people working on that project under Simon Bennett's, and it's been running for years. And we absolutely wouldn't be able to do a lot of the training that we do on a community level without tools like Zap. And then we've also got Juice Shop as well, which is like the deliberately insecure site where you can go in and you can basically hack things without getting arrested, which is always good. And that's like a really good entry level thing so that you can start building up your skills, so that you can join things like Hack the Box and look at wider CTFs and stuff. So definitely there are projects across the board from like technical to less technical. There's lots of training that's available within the education committee. We're looking at standards and training for developers. There's like so many training guides that they're starting to really kind of try and work through, sort of like specifically AppSec stuff. Certification and accreditation is something that the foundation's been looking at for a long time as well. Because we just have so much in terms of the different standards and accreditations and certifications across the industry, and it can get very, very confusing. So having a really easily accessible way of educating the wider community in terms of safe software is really, really useful. And that's what OWASP tries to bring together and maintain. But of course, it can only do that if people actually include themselves in the open source project. So it's the people that contribute that really make it what it is.
That was going to be my next question, is obviously for the people listening who think they do want to be involved, how do they actually make that happen?
Just go on the website. So we have this ridiculous wiki. It's just called OWASP.org, and you can browse all of the projects and you can get in touch with whoever's leading the project through the wiki. So if you wanted to set up a meeting, like a meetup in your area, they'll tell you how to do it on the wiki. You can get in touch with them and you can set up the meetup. If you want to start your own project, you can do that again through the wiki, and you can get like someone to sponsor you and work with you on it. It's just all that information's there. It can be overwhelming at first, but it's actually really, really nicely put together now. It used to be a bit more like Wikipedia. Now it's a bit more like a website. Which again is about trying to keep things as accessible as possible, because as we all know, as things grow, they don't always grow in a structure that makes sense to everybody. So a bit of topiary's gone on there. And the new website is actually so navigable. It's really, really, really awesome. So yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. They've got a section on events, chapters. There's all about the foundation itself, how to browse the different projects, how to start up your own project, how to make a donation, because obviously we're a charity. So yeah, all roads leads to OWASP in the end, but the wiki's brilliant.
And then I guess just to touch on this, just to sort of, for my own understanding, really, I guess more than anything, I guess other people's, naturally, OWASP needs relationships with industry. Dan, you're talking to us today as an employee of Booking.com.
Yep.
Saskia, you're more on the vendor side, although you run your own company. So it's kind of different, coming from different perspectives, essentially. How does that OWASP relationship with industry work in terms of vendor, businesses, and everything? And to what extent is all of these different types of stakeholder necessary to make OWASP what it is?
Well, I guess from the industry side, I've been pushing for Booking to be a corporate sponsor of OWASP. We use OWASP tools, we use OWASP resources. Why not give back to the community? I mean, if we bought a scanning tool as opposed to using Zap, we'd probably be paying into the millions for as big as Booking is.
Yeah.
And looking at the corporate donation, it's pennies in comparison. So why not support the community, support this foundation that's educating the world, as opposed to And I'm not saying not opposed to paying for a good service, but if there's a good community option, it's always been my personal opinion that we should be supporting the community.
Definitely.
Yeah, the foundation is vendor neutral, so vendor neutrality is really, really important. We don't ever publicly support any product or vendor, but we rely on them to fund us, and we rely on them to donate to us in more than one way. So it's not just about money; it's actually about time. So if you think how many people who come from industry are the experts, and they're the people who are putting in the time to do the projects, to contribute to the top 10, to run the meetups. Dan puts in so much time and effort to work with the sponsors that we have. He's, and this is time that Booking is donating through him. My company donate my time. I spend a lot of time sort of building the community. I sort of get a lot of the speakers in, come from my network of people. Dan and I have spent a long time organizing these sort of community events across the board for InfoSec. And this is all time that our companies are donating, because they encourage us to do this. Booking gives up its space. Booking pays for refreshments. And, it kind of feels a bit first worldy when it's like, come to our meetup and we've got loads of wine because Saskia's there. We've got loads of wine and nice food and pizzas and things like that. But actually, it does make it an easier environment to network if you've got a focal point of something like food and drinks for people to be able to stand over and maybe start a conversation about. It's good for the students to be able to mix with people in an environment that feels a little bit more relaxed, because it's quite intimidating for them. But they do need to build these relationships with people in industry, because this is where their next job is coming from. So supporting that sort of wider community is something that's really, really important to OWASP, whilst retaining this vendor neutrality.
And do you find there's much engagement from like government and public bodies at all? Because obviously, cybersecurity is a national security risk, and I'd expect that they'd be engaging in some form to try and sort of enable you guys. Do you ever see any of that?
Yes, they're absolutely fantastic. We get hosted a lot by Dish, for example, and Dish is like a nationally funded body. They have NCSC in their building, so effectively NCSC are helping to host us, because Dish is an NCSC project. Well, it's in combination with some other people as well. And they definitely contribute in terms of expertise. And supporting the wider foundation. We don't have a huge number of chapters in the UK. We're kind of fun. Not like B-sides. We have all the B-sides, but fewer of the OWASPs. Whereas in other countries, you tend to have fewer conferences and more community groups. But yeah, they're very, very supportive of the foundation, and certainly supportive of OWASP Manchester.
I don't know if that's got anything to do with our culture. In the sort of, you offer someone to set up a community and they're like, mate, do you want to organise a piss up? And they're like, yeah, let's do it.
It is a commitment. I think this is the thing. I think B-sides are wonderful, and I think it's great that people get the opportunity to go to a conference and in their area and listen to people speak. But yeah, I would encourage anybody. I think we've got 24 B-sides now in the UK, so I would encourage anybody who is wanting to open up a B-sides in a smaller area to consider an OWASP. We only have to do 4 meetings a year. That's the requirement that the foundation has of us to be an active chapter. If you have less than 4, you go dormant and the foundation stops supporting you, because you're not really doing anything in the community at that point. So we do our 4 meetings a year as a minimum. We also add in the odd social. It's not always just talks and stuff. We the CTF that we did alongside Grey Hats, where we had Handsome Rob's shooting range, and we had a load of analog stuff so that non-technical people could enjoy it as well. That was I think that was our best turnout ever, wasn't it, Dan? It was insane.
It was so much fun. I had a group of testers who were interested in security, but not as well practiced as a pen tester would have been. But we weren't last. And I even won the write-up competition even. So we even placed in some areas. So yeah, it was so much fun. Lock picking, shooting range, the radio hacking.
We had the radio hacking, and then we had the social engineering where you had to like do the text message with the social engineer. So that was super fun as well. Oh my god, remember someone popped one of the leaderboards and I got really angry and I sent that Slack message out and told everybody else, and it popped up in the middle of your presentation at work. It literally said, "Mother is not happy." Yeah,
Amazing.
don't pop the leaderboard when mother's in the room. But
So I
yeah,
guess-
so it is a commitment, but it's not a huge commitment. Is in like monthly meetups. That really is a commitment, and it takes a lot of organizing, and getting speakers is always the hardest thing, to be honest. But doing something quarterly is a lot more manageable. And the reach that it has for the community is amazing. Like a conference is once a year and it's a wonderful event, but that sort of consistency, the continuity of having something quarterly means that there's a focal point for people to meet up and spend time together that they might not do otherwise. And it really does build the community, really, really does build the community.
Perfect. And I guess, one thing that I'll say before we move on, I think one of the things that OWASP, it's all well and good saying that, lots of different people are contributing to OWASP, but I think what it does in terms of setting the standard for industries, I think to some extent they definitely lead vendors in the way that vendors build. They look at OWASP as who's setting the standard. Obviously, you've got what you do around students and how students are coming through. I think you put all these things on the outside and you put OWASP in the middle. I think if you were to remove OWASP, there would be a lot of the blind leading the blind in a way that you don't have that kind of focal point that everybody looks to.
Yeah, without
Standards.
OWASP, there really wouldn't be that North Star.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be, that guiding light that people do look to, that take their guidance from. People just be going off in their own direction. Hey, this is important to us, so it should be important to you. But no, this is important to us over here. But OWASP really takes that global view, literally that global view, and says, here actually are the issues that we need to be talking about.
But we're definitely not short of the vendors attempting the thought leadership. And I guess, in some cases that's absolutely valid, especially when it's backed up by the evidence. You see it across the board. But I think definitely in some cases you often read stuff and you think, I'm just going to fact check that. And I guess organizations like OWASP are crucial for things like that as well.
For sure.
So I guess with all that in mind, let's talk about what's coming up for OWASP Manchester chapter. What's in the diary? What's planned? What should people be excited about?
Well, our next meetup's on April 18th. Our next meetup's April the 18th, and we're at Dish for that one. And we've got Eliza May Austin from That Security Company coming to talk about Draco. And we've got Jamal Harris from Digital Interruption from my company, who I believe is going to be talking about how to decompile Flutter applications, which should be fun. Jay does a lot of stuff around things like Frida. He does a lot of stuff around radio. He's like super into mobile. So I think Flutter apps as like hybrid applications could be quite an interesting one to take a look at. And then we've got in the summer, we're working with a guy called Silverfish, who does the scavenger hunts for all of the different conferences, and they're super fun and quite ridiculous. And I'm now YouTube famous for a photograph of me sat on the toilet because my team won. Oh God, I can't remember what it was. Best team effort, most ridiculous bunch of idiots, whatever. But we put in like the funniest submissions because I realized that we weren't going to win. We didn't have enough on the technical side to win, and I'm a little bit competitive. So ended up chinning half a bottle of Henderson's Relish doing a handstand, photograph of me on the loo. It got a bit out of hand, really. So he's going to help us do a scavenger hunt in the summer, which should be absolutely fantastic. So that's going to be in central Manchester, hopefully on a Saturday. And it's just going to be a bunch of hackers running around having fun. And then our fall, our autumn one is with you guys, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, it's going to be held at booking.com. Putting in the paperwork now to get it all approved and signed off and funded. I like to hold it in the cafeteria. It makes it a bit more social. And then the kitchen staff can show off because now the new office has a full kitchen. And they're like, damn, show off.
The food last time at booking was insane. It was so good. It was like little proper canapes and shit. We felt so fancy. But there was a problem with the booze order. So we had to go to Tesco's down the road with my credit card. I was like, it's fine, just get it on my corporate credit card. I'll do, I'll put in a claim later. So off we trundled down to Tesco's, and we got to Tesco's with these two really lovely ladies from the kitchen and me and Dan. And then I'm like, we're never going to get all of this shit back. I'm just going to go and ask the lady behind the counter if we can take the, they're not trolleys, but they're like baskets on wheels.
Yeah, baskets with wheels.
Yeah.
I was like, we can go ask that lady.
So
they all elected me to go and ask the lady. They were like, you're posh and friendly. She'll like you. You're posh and friendly. You go ask her. So I go up to this lady and she's got a little name badge on. And I was like, Marjorie, hello. If I give you my driver's license, can we take these back to booking.com and I'll bring them back in 20 minutes? So we were going up the street, chinkling away, looking like we'd been on the rob in Tesco.
This seems like a bit of a recurring theme. I think we did almost exactly the same thing. OWASP chapter about 6 months back or something like that, where we managed to get the food. The food was all beautiful and nice, although a little bit late. But the drinks, we had to run around to Tesco, and there were people outside, students arriving to come listen to the talks and asking where it was. And I was like, it's just in here. Come into Tesco's, carry this, and then you can go into the event and people will love you.
Just for anybody listening, being hopelessly disorganized is not a requirement to run a chapter. You can run a chapter without any of this stress by simply just knowing what the requirements are for an event.
You know what? It was Sainsbury's fault. They were supposed to deliver to the back door and they just drove off. They drove off with all our booze.
Yeah. Food delivery people seem to manage to find how to deliver it. Booze and drinks delivery companies seem to go, well, I can't buy. Just leave.
I mean, if you want to have a laugh watching a bespectacled American screaming, "Come back!" It's a Sainsbury's delivery driver and taking his booze. We had one. This was pre-COVID, so we had one at Old Booking. Do you remember when it was rental car start? I had one at Old Booking, and I don't know if anybody knows Mark Carney, but Large Cardinal. He was one of the lecturers at Leeds University, Leeds Trinity Metropolitan. Not sure, but they've got like the big hack society there. And we had a similar incident where the booze people didn't turn up, so the trip to Tesco Metro was done. And we managed to find a sack trolley. So we stacked everything on this sack trolley. And Mark Carney, who's not a small man, was like wheeling all of these boxes of like cider and beer. And I don't know why he decided to use the revolving door rather than go in the side door that I was using. Yeah. But he went in the revolving door and got trapped in it. And then the sack trolley fell over and that wedged the door shut. And obviously being me, instead of like helping him, I videoed it and put it on Twitter. We had to get security to come and open the doors back up to retrieve Mark and his big sack trolley full of beer and cider. Yeah, we look like truly capable and competent people, honestly. The talks are great though. You should definitely come to talks.
And you should consider running your own chapter. All good. The event, the most recent event coming up, is there still tickets available for that?
We've not actually put it on Meetup yet. It's going to go up in the next couple of days, so they do tend to go quite fast. Yeah. I will say to anybody who signs up, please, will you turn up? And if you don't turn up, will you like release the space? Because post-COVID, we've always had a problem with meetups that like more people say they're going to come than actually turn up. Yeah. But so COVID, it's like 50-50 at the moment. Like half the people don't show, and it makes it really hard for us to like basically figure out catering and the amount of space.
So when that comes up, keep an eye out for it. We'll be posting it from our page as well, and we'll probably attach it to this video for anybody watching it. Cool. Anybody got anything else to say? I think that's probably a nice place to finish off.
I mean, that's a very good place to finish it off.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for listening to this week's episode of the Cyber Talk podcast. Thanks. Bye now.